Good morning. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad that you are too. Sarah, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sarah, and I have started speaking on Sunday mornings as a way to share what I have learned, both a way of recognizing what I have learned in my lifetime, right? Primarily what I learned growing up and how I saw the world growing up, and what I have learned in recent years that has shifted the way I live my life in such a radical way that it has changed what I refer to as everything. Okay? And when I say that, I don't say that to mean that like everything in my life has changed necessarily, although a lot of things have over the years. It's to say that when I changed how I saw the world, how I then also saw myself, and how I saw you and the other people in my life, everything in my life then changed, right? So I'll get into that a little bit more. But I have been calling this series, and my just hopping on here on Sunday mornings to share with you, very intentionally hopping on, how to live a rich life, because that is not what I'm living. Although I refer to it in a few different ways, like liberated living. I think I'm going to rename the series How to Live, How to See the World in a New Way. Because at the heart of things, that really is what has happened. And while my life is very rich, and I now believe in so many things differently than I did years ago, I think the thing that people are looking for the most, and we see that even in the world in the last week, is a different way to be, a different way to live, and a different way to see the world. Because for so many, our outlook, your outlook, the outlook has become one full of fear, full of anxiety, full of uncertainty, and for many, a really negative view of what is to come. And what results when we have a negative view of what is to come, eventually over a period of time, some it takes a very short period of time, others it happens over a longer period of time, we grow unexcited about the future. And for many, we grow pessimistic, and we look at the future very unfavorably. And what happens when you look at the future very unfavorably is it affects everything you do. And it affects the way that you present yourself, and it affects the way that you feel. And when something as profound as your outlook on the future takes a hold of you, and it becomes what is guiding you, and therefore it affects everything that you're doing. And you show up as just a little bit less than, right? And progressively, more and more less than who you are intended to be in the world. And when you show up as less than who you are intended to be in the world is just not as good a place to be. The world is missing out, we'll say, because you're not showing up in the fullness of who you're meant to be. And when we're all showing up a little bit less than what we're meant to be in the world is just not as friendly of a place. And so we end up in this cycle, right? Which from my vantage point, as I study human behavior and I interact with people and I am fascinated by human behavior, right? I've literally built my career on studying human behavior for over the past 25 years. And I'm so intrigued by it. Naturally, when people are unexcited about life, when they're fearful of the future, when they're full of anxiety and they're looking out there, right? And they're less excited about living, well then your own view, right? It also affects everyone else. And so everyone else starts to become affected by it. And I'm so passionate about this topic because I was there myself not that long ago. And for many years, I held this belief, really certain beliefs since childhood, that I had a negative outlook of the future. I didn't believe that things were going to get better. In fact, I was certain that things were going to get much, much worse as I got older, right? And I was looking forward to the end, right? The afterlife, the time that I was taught would be way better than here. And I became very cynical. For those of you who've known me for many, many years, there was a part of me, we'll say, that was very, very cynical of the future. And so I slowly descended, right, by that view of the future and by that view of the world, and became far less effective and far less useful to you and to myself. So I'm passionate about the topic for that reason, because I know that when you are living at your very best, it is when you get to be your very best, you get to feel your very, very best, and you impact the greater collective in the very best way. So this morning I want to talk about free will and what it means, why it's important, and what happens when we don't believe, and when we don't know that we have free will. And I think, growing up, this topic was talked about so much in my childhood, in various different places, that it kind of became just like a catchphrase and more of an academic conversation than a real strategy for me to use to live better. So, why is it important, right? Do you have free will? And why is it important? Why is the topic even important? And so I want to just generally propose that free will is simply the freedom to choose. Now, if you grew up in certain circumstances where you learned that either free will came in a certain slice of life, right? That you had free will over certain things versus free will over everything, or if you learned that you didn't have free will, right? Whichever side of the camp you grew up with, you're greatly impacted by those beliefs. And how is that true, right? It's true because if the way that you were taught is to say that you didn't have free will, and again, even if you were taught that you didn't have free will in just a certain way, right, then a certain part of you gets filtered and a certain part of you cultivates and develops beliefs that don't believe, right, that don't indicate that you are in charge of you. And that is huge to really sink your teeth into, right? And so you can ask yourself, do I feel fully in charge of myself? Feel free to drop into the comments the answer. Do you feel in charge of yourself? Do you feel in control of yourself? Do you feel that you have full decision power over yourself? Right? And if the answers are anything other than absolutely yes, then you know that you have some beliefs that have gotten into your belief system and your way of seeing the world that indicates that someone else has control. So when you think about why this matters so much, right? This ability to have full governance over yourself, it matters because when we hit a roadblock in life and we're not able to figure something out, or we can't quite figure out the path, or we're not quite sure what we're doing, or anything like that, or there are things happening in the world that we don't feel good about or we don't like, and we have some thoughts or some beliefs in our minds and in the way that we see the world that says, I'm not fully in control of myself. I don't have full power over myself or what happens to me. Then we get outraged at certain things that happen, or we get angry at other people, right? We turn outward, right? This sense of blame or outrage or anger, right? These various different feelings and emotions that we have built up inside of us that we want to get out because they're very uncomfortable, right? And they contribute to our feeling out of control. And we then become a person, we fall into blaming other people, holding other people responsible, and or we also turn on ourselves, right? And so one of the words that has helped us to understand this better is we become a victim. And we go into this place inside of us where we feel powerless. We don't have control. And we feel subject to. And another way of saying that is we become a victim. We become a victim of circumstance. We become a victim of what is going on around us. And we feel that loss of control, that loss of power. And so simply put, why it's so important to understand that you actually do have free will, right? Is to understand that you have the ability to manage, to control, to be in charge of, to govern what goes on inside of your mind. And so if you're anything like me growing up, I didn't think I had full control, right? And there's so many reasons why we come to understand that we don't have control. Like one, of course, we're born into a family, right? And we have parents, whatever capacity that was for you and whoever those people were for you. For most, it's parents, traditional parents. And the way in which we end up getting parented for most humans on the planet, it starts to cultivate inside of us something other than I'm in control of myself, right? Because as they're teaching you and training you and caring for you, there are many circumstances where we don't feel in control of ourselves. And we get into what is just simply known as power struggle, right? When we have certain opinions, we start to assert ourselves, and our parents have certain opinions. And I'm talking like kids, like 2, 3 years old, right? This is when it starts. And we desire certain things. We don't want to eat certain food. We don't want to wear certain clothes. And so that exchange starts to happen. And depending on how you were raised over the years, for most people, we start to understand that we don't have full control over ourselves. And there are these other people, these adults, that have control over us. And this, of course, continues right through school age into, young adulthood and so on. And so all of that carries with you until you learn differently, until you really come to understand it differently. You continue to believe into adulthood that you aren't in full control of yourself. And when we don't believe we're in full control of ourselves, we do all kinds of things, right? And just to name a few, we do things like the big things, like we stay in relationships that we don't feel are good for us, or relationships that in some way we understand are hurting us, right? We stay in jobs, we stay in environments of all kinds, because we don't fully believe we have full control over ourselves. Full control to be able to do something different, right? And because of the way that we're taught and trained in childhood, we're wanting to please, we're wanting to do the right thing, we're wanting to get that reward from our parents, right? To be seen as good. Of course, this is like so normal and so natural and happens for almost everyone. And so in those early years of life, we start to cultivate ways of being that tells us how to then continue being as we grow up. And so when we learn these different mechanisms, these different tools, these different techniques of getting approval, of feeling good, of feeling valid, of feeling approved of, we start to change who we are, right? We start to accommodate, we start to adjust ourselves. And again, this is like super early on in life that this starts. So I'm not like talking about being an adult and caring what other people think or don't care what people think. No. I'm talking about early childhood where you're not having thoughts like you have now as an adult, where you're able to analyze and really process information in a completely different way. I'm talking about child, like before 7 years old. And in those very early years of life, you start to learn. It is when you learn, if I do this, I get received well, right? I get the approval of those people in my life who are like basically the people that give me everything I need, right? And so we start to adjust to what they desire for us. And this is that process where if that continues over the years, in early childhood, if that parenting style, we'll say, continues and you don't learn something different, you don't learn how to actually truly manage and guide and direct yourself, then that carries over into your young adulthood and into now. Carries with you essentially into the end of your life, into the years as you get to be an adult. And until you learn something radically different, a new way to be, how to actually truly see the world where you're fully in control of you, well then even as an adult, you find yourself saying things like, oh, I can't do that. Right? And the only reason that you would say something like, oh, I can't do that, I can't leave, I can't do that, I can't, be that, is because you're now just using that exact same strategy that you learned in early childhood to now govern yourself according to the rules of childhood. Okay, so tying this back in, right? We then essentially learn in early childhood that we don't have free will. And it gets then reinforced by the various institutions of school and religion and, various pockets of social life, our friends in various places, that we are not fully in control of ourselves. And so then now as an adult, you're in these different spaces and places within yourself where you don't feel like you have free will, where you don't feel like you have full control. I mean, just as simple as what you're eating. Right? I mean, I can think of many, many, many times in my life where I have not felt in full control over what I'm eating. I still have moments where I don't feel in full control. The difference is now I know that I am in full control, and the reason that I sometimes violate my own well-being, my own desire to eat healthier, to eat those things that are really going to be good for me, is because I have these childhood attachments to the rules that I learned in childhood about what was right, what was wrong. And so there are still parts of me that are attached to those ways. And so I allow myself to violate those rules that I now have for myself, those desires that I have for who I desire to be now come into conflict with who and what I was taught to be as a child. And so ultimately, this is what I do to help people, right? This is why I'm so big on liberation, because we have these childhood attachments in all different areas, ways of being ultimately, ways of being ourselves that we come into conflict with when we now are adults and we want to be something different. Right? We realize, I can't keep eating these certain foods, or I can't keep eating at this certain time of day if I want to be agile and flexible and on the move, right? And or I want to live a very long, healthy life. They come into conflict with each other. And I use that example because it's so easy, and it's been something that I've really had to give a lot of attention to in my life. Is food, right? And how we navigate that path with food, that relationship, that dynamic with food. And so when you don't separate who you were as a young person and who you are now, you simply continue to govern yourself with those same childhood rules. And so what I do is I help people get liberated from the old way of being so that you can actually be who you need to be now to actually be able to accomplish those things that you desire to accomplish now as an adult and into your future. And that's where that whole thing about liberation and liberated living comes into play. Is because when you get liberated, you actually can live a new way. A way that's full of you recognizing you have free will over yourself, you are responsible for yourself, and you are 100% capable of being who you want to be and accomplishing those things that you truly desire to accomplish. Okay, so some of those hindrances to our free will, right, that show up in these very specific ways are things like people pleasing, conforming to what other people want. So just think about, like, how do you show up today in the world, right? Because chances are, for most of us, right, we're all so similar. Even though we're super unique, we're also super similar. And so there are only a few ways in which we give up our free will, which we give up our power. But it's found in some of these ways, right? People pleasing, conforming to others, prioritizing other people, playing small, feeling fearful, feeling not good enough, seeking the approval of others, that need that we have for validation. And so what happens here is we continue to go to other people outside of ourselves to feel okay about who we are and what we're doing in life. Instead of knowing, right, that we are exactly what we need to be, right? And that all of the power is within us to be who we want to be, to accomplish what we want to accomplish. We go to other people, right? Because we're playing out these childlike patterns, these childhood patterns. And until we learn differently, we just simply continue to repeat them. And we give up our power in those ways that I just mentioned. And so the way to be able to reclaim your power is to be able to work out those strategies that we have learned over our lifetime of how to feel good, of how to fit in, of how to believe that we're okay, of how to have safety, right? We believe that our safety is in those things like people pleasing and finding approval from other people, seeking our approval, our validation from what others give to us. And it's amazing how many people I talk to tons and tons of people all the time. I'm talking to people, and how many people believe wholeheartedly that their way of knowing that they're okay in the world is based on what other people are saying to them, how other people are reacting to them. And it happens so naturally, right? Because we are literally taught that from childhood. And so of course it feels natural. So our awareness is what needs to shift in order for us to be different, in order for us to fully govern and watch over ourselves, to be able to be who we want to be. We have to expand our awareness of how the world actually works. And it works different from how most of us were taught from childhood. So, shifting into, right, how do we access this power? Because it's very exciting. When I came into awareness that I was actually fully in charge of myself, it was a mind-blowing experience. And let me tell you, it took multiple times of learning this content and testing it out before I fully believed it. Okay? Because again, I'd been believing this other thing for so long that is what felt so true for me, right? And again, I was, very educated, very capable. I had a great job. I mean, I was doing all of the things that I was led to believe that I needed to do in order to feel really good about who I was. And I did not feel good about who I was, right? Which is what led me to really seek these answers and to go 100% into understanding a new way to live, because the way that I had come to believe was going to get me to be successful, was going to get me to a place where I felt really good about me. It didn't work. It didn't work for me. And I am so grateful now that I followed this path and that things got so bad for me that I was motivated to find a new way to be. And so I just want to encourage you, wherever you are in your journey, you're right where you're meant to be, and it's good wherever you are. So wherever you are, I just feel so wanting to say that just again, for wherever you are right now in your journey. I know that pain of getting to a place where you think, I should really have it figured out by now, and it feels really shitty that I don't. Right? And you're like, I've been given all of these things, all of these opportunities, all of this good stuff, right? Whether it was good parents, it was education, it was opportunities. And then you get to a certain place in life and you're like, yeah, didn't work, right? And this is the thing, what I now know is it didn't work the way that I thought it should work. But it did work because it got me here. And that's why I now, with all sincerity of heart, can be so grateful, so, immensely excited over the path that I took. That even though it led me to the darkest place I've ever been in my life, I have gotten to here because of that path. And so I can be genuinely excited and grateful for everything that happened to me and all of the players in my life journey, because they have led me to here, where I now fully understand I am in charge of my future. I am in control of my destiny. It is within me, and it is not to be blamed on anyone else for life not going the way I wanted to. So it's an extremely liberating process, which is why I put on everything, this is the path. Liberation is the path to your own personal freedom. And I believe it at 100%. So we are circling back around here, what to do, right? What to do with all of that. And so if you're aware that you don't feel fully in charge of yourself, now is the time to reclaim and to establish a new awareness. And so it comes through a journey, through a process, and it also gets boiled down to something as simple as deciding that you are in charge, that you do have free will to choose your own path, free will to choose that which you want for your life, where you're not waiting for some outside entity to tell you what you should do and where you should go and how you should be, right? And so just to tie this in, right, part of the reason why I am so strongly believing of it and so strongly convicted of it is because I used to wait. And I'll just give you this example for my own self, right? And you interpret it for yourself, whatever feels like a good fit. But for me, I came to learn about a power greater than myself that I called God, right? And that was the way that I understood how I came to be. And for the longest time, my relationship with God was where I believed he was outside of me and I was waiting on him, right, to guide me to know who to be and what to do. And the reason that this became so conflicted for me, so difficult, right, is because it just didn't fully make sense that I was waiting on something else to guide me. And so I, right, through all of what I've already explained to you of how we start to lose ourselves, right? And again, that happens at age 2, 3, 4, 5, where we lose ourselves. We lose trust in ourselves, we lose acceptance in ourselves, and we lose the ability to successfully guide ourselves. And so naturally, as we're losing that at an early age, we don't establish a healthy understanding of God, because it's already gotten warped starting at ages 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, right? Because when we can't truly trust ourselves, we also cannot truly trust God, right? And when I'm describing God, I'm talking about that which I believe created me, that which I believe created all of this, right? Which is not really, it's no longer the same as what I learned as a child, right? The version of how I view God and how I'm describing God to you is something far bigger, which is important for me to say. And I want to just allow you to understand that in the way that feels good for you right now with where you're at. And so it's expanded significantly. And now when I hear and know God is within me, right? And it is God that is leading me, I also know that it is the same. It is tied so closely. It is connected, right? That it is God within me, and therefore I am only waiting on me. Okay, I am no longer waiting on other people or things outside of me to determine my path. And so the same is for you. You get to decide your path. You get to determine your path, because ultimately it does come back to you. It comes back to you, and it comes back to your understanding of God being within you to guide and direct you. And so the thing that allows you to know where to go and who to be and how to be, right, is you coming into alignment within yourself of that which you feel led to do, that which you feel led to go after, that which you feel led to be, right? And it's those moments, and this is why it's so important to get really good mentorship, really good teaching, be in relationship with someone who's able to help you. Because we get so warped by the things of the world and the way that we were trained as children, that we can't trust ourselves. And if we can't trust ourselves, we can't hear God within us. We can't hear the small, still voice within us. And so we get confused. And it's really just that simple. As an adult, I remember so many years of feeling confused about what to do and how to be, right? And so you can't trust that still small voice that is coming from within you. But that is actually the path, and I keep it just that simple because it actually is just that simple, is when it's distinguishing between the difference of acting in the natural self, the force, this is what I want and I'm gonna make it happen, right? Which is motivated from one of those places that I talked about earlier, that place of needing approval, that place of fear, that place of anxiety, feeling insecure, feeling unsafe. And so we want to do certain things to feel safe in the world. Versus coming into alignment with that we trust, that which we know we are meant for. Those things that we believe that we are meant for, that we're meant to do, right? Those things that make us feel scared and unsure, right? Those things that historically would say feel risky, right? Love fits right in there, right? Taking big leaps, trying out new things, going to new places. All of those things bring up and trigger within us a sense of fear, a sense of hesitation. Why? Because we've spent a lifetime looking to someone else to tell us whether or not it was okay to do that thing that we really wanted to do. And so it feels uncertain. It feels scary to actually do the thing that we feel within us we want to do. And so it can really get boiled down to this very simple piece, which is you have free will, right? There's literally no one else in a literal sense for most. Some of you may be in situations where you literally have someone telling you, even as an adult, what you can and cannot do. But I want you to know the reality, the truth of things are, you are always in charge of you. And you carry the still small voice of God within you. And when you come into alignment with that still small voice within you, and you bring your will into alignment with that still small voice, that is the path that you know you are meant to follow. And when you find that sweet spot, as I call it, that is you coming into alignment, right? That you coming into alignment with the thing historically perhaps you were taught of God, right? And for those of you that weren't taught that, put in your own vocabulary, right? But there's a peace that comes inside of you when you know the thing you're meant to be doing, when you know the you're meant to be being, but it quickly it comes, into conflict. It comes face to face with our childhood upbringing and those beliefs that we were taught to not do based on what we deeply feel is the thing to do. And so when those two come into conflict, you get stuck, right? And that's where we lose our power. We lose our sense of self. We lose our momentum. We lose that trust that we have with ourselves, and we get stuck. We get paralyzed. We get into the analysis paralysis of things. We go into the overthinking of things. And we go into this space of wanting to be in control. And when we go into the space of wanting to be in control of ourselves, in control of life, right? And we don't feel like we are because we have a desire to do something else, and or someone in our world is doing something that doesn't fit into alignment with what allows us to feel safe and secure. And so our natural reaction is to want to control. And we want to control ourselves, and we naturally want to control other people. And that is when we shift, right? And we lose sight of our free will. We lose sight of our true power. And that control is what causes us to go small. It's what causes us to become ineffective at guiding ourselves. And what most of us do, right, is we start to want to control other people. And here's where this crazy cycle, right? So many things are a cycle, and we refer to things as a cycle, right? And this is the cycle that actually hurts us as humans, hurts humanity the most, which is this cycle. As adults, right, we now have this thing within us that desires to have control. And so that control gets put onto other people, which ultimately gets put onto your own children. And so now you've been raised up in this environment, and you've become an adult, and you're now struggling with all of these things as an adult to actually govern yourself, to have agency over yourself. And then you have children, and then what do? Totally unintentionally, right? This is like an unseen process, an unseen cycle that continues. But then naturally, you control your children. And the way in which you train them, the way in which you raise them up is shrouded with control. And the cycle goes on. And so naturally, here you are now, again, as an adult, having these control issues. And I want to just offer to you this morning, every human on the planet struggles with control. And when you deny it and you think, no, I'm not controlling, I don't try to control other people. Well, the way I think about it, you're just in denial. And so for those people who are in denial, right, that's a journey unto itself. To become aware, oh yeah, of course, I have control issues. And I'll save that for another morning to talk about control, because it is a fabulous topic to talk about and really understand deeply. So wrapping us up for practical steps, you can use something super simple like a phrase that says, I am responsible, 100% responsible for myself and everything that happens to me. Okay, and I want to just clarify to say it doesn't mean that you're at fault, right? And because of the way that we're most often trained and the way that we grow up, it's so much in this mentality of victim and control and, fear and blaming, right? That we come to interpret that we're at fault, right? Which is where shame gets introduced into the world. And so it's not at all about you being at fault or you to blame. No, not at all. This is simply from a place of power that you get to understand and now live in the knowing that you are fully responsible, fully in charge of yourself and everything that happens to you. From a place of empowerment, a place of liberation from all the old rules and all of the old attachments that you have held. And so from this moment on, your life has the opportunity to be completely different from the way that it has been. And so it simply starts with this phrase, I am responsible for myself and everything that happens to me. Again, from a position and energy of power, not from an energy of blame. It's a very significant distinction. And so you get to decide, right? Free will. You get to decide what it is you want for your life. You're no longer attached. You're no longer held to the past, your childhood, the old way, the old rules. The future is yet to be known. The future is yet to be written. You get to decide. What is it that you want? What is it that is exciting for you? What is it that's been placed on your heart to create, to be, to contribute to the world? It's yours for the taking. So you decide what you want for your life. You get committed to the belief that you are meant for that. And then you go after it. Okay, so as always, this is what I do to help people. And I encourage you to, of course, get partnered up with someone who is able to help you become this version of you. It is your most powerful self in the world. It is the way that you contribute the most to the world and to change and to things becoming better than they are now. Your outrage, really? I'll again save that for another topic, but it really only takes things so far and ultimately doesn't change the world. It actually continues the cycle of control and anger and negativity that gets pumped out there. But you shifting who you are and who you believe you are and how you govern yourself and what you believe you're capable of is the thing that 100% shifts the world, changes the world. Because the way that you will show up when crazy shit is happening in the world is completely different than how you show up when you're governed by the old rules. So I want to thank you for joining me this morning, and I will drop my link here into the comments. It's that time for you, if it's that time for you to partner with someone, I would be honored to have that conversation with you, to be able to really hear what it is that you desire for your life, who you know you're called to be, and what it is you're meant to do in this world, to be able to get the things that are on your heart that you desire, to have that conversation, and then for me to be able to talk with you about how I can help you to make it happen. I'm here every Sunday mornings at 9:30, and I am so grateful for the time that we have spent together. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing how this message has helped you and how you start to shift the way in which you are living. I will see you next week. Again, thank you for being here with me. Take care.